Hi, everyone. Renee Murphy, Principal Analyst, Forrester Research. I cover governance, risk, and compliance. I write the GRC Wave. I've been at Forrester for 6.5 years. Prior to joining Forrester, I was a network engineer, VP of data center operations, and both an internal and external IT auditor.
That was fast.
When you do it all day long, every day, you get really quick at it.
Supra is our Associate Vice President responsible for some of our strategic initiatives in our professional services organization. Supra?
Thanks, Salil. Thanks for the introduction. I've been with the GRC industry for over 20 years now, and I was with MetricStream, or I've been with MetricStream from the inception, actually. It's quite fascinating and quite interesting to see how the market has evolved. Actually, we started with talking about SOX compliance to a few compliance areas, and now we talk about first line of defense and things like that. So had the privilege to work with some of you all, and also had the privilege to work with CIBC. So as we go through the case study, I'm happy to share the learnings and best practices.
Thanks. And Shelagh Larkin, responsible for the eGRC program at CIBC.
Thank you. So CIBC, is this too loud?
No.
Okay. Is the Canadian Imperial Bank of Commerce. So we're a large financial institution in Canada. My role is business lead for the eGRC implementation. We started on our journey about 3 years ago with MetricStream. We've built in about 5 different applications, and my role, as you mentioned there, by background, I'm a CPA, so I've had various roles in banking, corporate real estate, but now my role is the GRC program.
Thanks, Shelagh. So I'll ask Renee to start off with a brief overview of the market, some of the trends that she's seeing here, and then we'll go on to some of the questions we have for the panel.
Yeah, so let me start. So I just wanted to start by saying, when we talk about integrated risk management, and we talk about the platform and the integration and pulling all that together for eGRC, I'm finding that the platform market is actually getting really smart about it, right? The risk intelligence feeds are what's making these platforms really, really smart. When you blend that with your own data, you're able to find a whole lot of different information you might not have found before. And I just wrote down a couple of things, right? Like we can use reputational impact data to determine our financial risk. Yeah, we can, actually. We could be leveraging that data elsewhere in the platform, right? We can use employee risk data to mitigate our internal threats. If we have any internal threat actors, we could do a lot better mitigation if we knew how happy our employees are now, so that we don't have to worry about that later. All that bleeds back in, right? I could do incredibly great risk management if I can just get out of the silo and abstract the data. And so when I talk to people now, when they call me, you're right, we've seen the industry kind of really move along, right? And it seems like it went all at once. Like I would be in the third-party risk management market, and they would be talking about, they've been talking about AI and machine learning for a really long time, but we've just started in the GRC market saying, wait a minute, what? You guys are, machine learning? Oh, wait, what? Oh, governance, risk, and compliance is about to go through its digital transformation. Yay, we need it. The whole business went through a digital transformation without us, didn't they? The whole bank went through all this. We're doing thousands of transactions a second, and we're still pulling 175 of them to take a look at them, right? Like, it's really not helpful. And so at some point, if we're going to really be truly governance, risk, and compliance professionals, we have to be able to have them comply at wire speed, and we have to be able to prove it at wire speed. So what I think about when I think about my journey over the last 6.5 years in this market, I've seen it go from really bad interfaces where you wouldn't want to use it for more than 10 minutes, I swear, because your eyes would start twitching, to now looking at these platforms where I say, I really think I can drive one of these things to do end-to-end risk management. I can probably automate most of it, and I'm really looking forward to what the story that's going to tell. Because listen, the more and more data we drive through these platforms, the better we're going to have to get at telling that story, right? And so I always look for the abstraction of the data to tell the story. I'm going to use customer experience data to explain to you our financial risk. Yeah, I'm going to do that. It's going to tell a story, right? So the more and more technical you get, and I just want you guys to not forget this. Tell stories, read stories. Like, take this data, do something with it. Think about think about the Mueller report and how no one wants to read it, right? It's the same thing going on in your organizations. No one wants to fill out risk assessments. No one wants to read this stuff. No one wants to do it. You have to. We want to. It's all for the right reasons. Don't make it about the data. Make it about the people. Make it about the stories. Make it meaningful. That's what's going to stick, right? And I think that's hard to do, and it's something we really do have to get really, really good at, right? Otherwise, no one's going to believe a word we say. I also want to say that it seems to me that tone at the top is something I'm hearing a lot around all these conversations, like, hey, how do I get everybody to do this? No one ever won anything by trying to do it in the middle. You can't do risk management in the middle. It doesn't work that way, right? We have to find the risk. We have to send it up and down the time. We have to do that for real, right? Like we can't fake that. And so if you don't have buy-in at the top, you're going to have a lot of problems. I said in my last panel, who do you trust more with your data? The FBI or Apple? That's meaningful in a very meaningful way, right? So you really do need to think at that. Tone at the top matters. If you're going to be an organization that cares about governance, risk, and compliance, it's going to come from the top. And when it comes from the top, you have to hold them accountable too. Are you seeing strategy show up in the GRC platforms yet? I'm starting to see strategy show up. They're tying it all into the strategy at the very top to say, is the board getting what they want out of this strategy? That's how good we're getting at it. And now we're able to just plug that all in and say, yeah, this is what it means to do risk management and do it at wire speed, right? The holy grail, I think, is being able to monitor all this stuff in real time. Just like the business gets to do all that transaction stuff in real time, I want to be able to do compliance in real time. I want to keep up with the speed of business. And I think that's what machine learning, AI, and breaking down the silos of the data is really going to do for us in the long run. We are going to make our digital transformation right along with the business like we should have from the beginning.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, Renee. So I'll ask Shelagh a couple questions here. One, just as when you started with this program, did you have all of these elements in mind? Did you think about this as a integrated GRC program?
We did. So when we started out, we were looking at not just where we were, but where we wanted to go, recognizing that with increased scrutiny from the regulators, with evolving and emerging risks, that we needed to become more efficient in our processes. We needed to be able to increase the risk management and compliance regulatory capabilities. We needed to have something that was repeatable, sustainable, and that could be used and leveraged across the organization. So we're a large organization that operates in many types of businesses around the world, and we needed the capability to ensure that we had consistency across and within each of those. As well, we wanted to be able to provide more reporting and analytic capabilities. We're spending a lot of time gathering data, analyzing it, synthesizing it so that it was common language, and sort of missing out on actually what the story of the data was telling us. So by looking and saying we need one platform, understanding that it's the underlying technology, you still need the people and processes in place, that would go a long way to really building out the integration of risk across the organization. So that's really, we did start with a view. We did a lot of thoughtful, I think, planning around it. We'd had a couple of kicks at it as an organization, but I think at a time 4 or 5 years ago, we were too siloed as an organization, and we weren't prepared to sort of break down those silos. There's been a real cultural shift within our bank, and that came with a change in leadership at the top to be more open, more transparent. And also, we now have this term called radical simplification. We're far from it, but at least I think this is a step in the right direction.
Gotcha. Okay. And as part of the program, did you think about the data, but also some of the taxonomy that you would have to put in place?
Yes.
An example to.
So, as part of our initial implementation, we did engage with an integration partner, and they made it very clear that in order to be successful, you had to establish the common taxonomies. And I'm basically echoing what was discussed this morning. Without having agreement up front of what the risk process taxonomies, what the org structures are going to be. You're going to lose the ability to analyze the data. I refer to the taxonomies as the spine, and without it, you can't leverage the system capability. It's not an easy task. However, the way that we approached it was to not start with a clean slate of, piece of paper, otherwise I'd still be here discussing it. But we went in with options and we engaged each of the use cases and got consensus up front, and which allowed each of these use cases to start evolving into those grade 2 taxonomies. So in addition, we also looked at what are the maturity of the processes that we're looking to onboard. So as part of we came up with a roadmap, and as part of that roadmap, we came up with criteria to say what would be the prioritization and how would we prioritize the use cases. So, for us, it's the technology, as I said, provides the capabilities and enabler. We look at, I say the technology is 20% and the rest is the people in the process.
Yeah, yeah. And so along those lines, did you have challenges in terms of getting buy-in across the organization, particularly at the executive level? And if so,
yes.
What did you all do about it?
We initially established a steering committee, and the initial mandate of the steering committee was to go through the vendor selection. By that time, we had agreement and consensus across the governance groups, including internal audit, including compliance, including risk, that this really was the direction that we needed to go. So at the outset, we had representation from each of the governance group and some of the businesses to do the selection. And from there, they've been continued to be engaged as the executive steering committee's role is really around the roadmap, approving changes to the roadmap, and if there's any significant change in direction, obviously they are engaged. And they continue to message. I would say as an organization, we have very strong support for this implementation, for this journey. As a group that is not a revenue generator, it's a challenge in terms of how do you calculate or the return on investment. We can't really, in the sense that we can't measure it against any revenue that we generate, but I think there's recognition that this is the way to go. And so with each deployment, we also build out project steering committees and status. We have project status groups, as well as we have a user community that we engage with in terms of any changes that are coming up. We get requests to make changes, and it goes through this user group to make sure that they are on side with it, and are there options to be considered? Gotcha.
Well, and as part of this, one of the things one always worries about is the adoption. In addition to the larger organization agreeing that we need to move forward in terms of getting users to adopt, is there anything additional you needed to do to make that happen?
So I would say if there is a risk of over-communicating, accept that risk and over-communicate. And I'd like to say be a little creative in how you do it. There was discussion yesterday about you need to hear something 6 times before it really gets embedded in you. So we communicated often, we communicated early, we communicated through various mechanisms. And again, messaging came from the top, and with that support and endorsement, it helps to get the message across. And the other thing, and we made sure that we listened to our users. They didn't always like the message, but if you could explain the why, about why we're doing something, and that it's really important not to just look at the individual use case, but to look at the total picture. Because something that means, something to one group may not apply to everyone. And we started out with the view that if we can meet 80% of your requirements and manage the other 20%, we're doing pretty well across. So it's, the change management is something that we often miss. There always, seems to be a lot of focus on the technology aspect of it. But without the change management and making sure that you've got the engagement, the awareness, you will not be successful. Another key thing is to really try to early on identify who your key stakeholders are, and that will go a long way to help to identify who the distractors and disruptors will be, and who also the early adopters are. And engaging with the early adopters will then help to lessen the negativity that the distractors have. In any organization, no matter how well prepared you are, how much you communicate, how much you try to anticipate, there's always going to be some little small nugget that doesn't agree. And, at some point, you just got to sort of draw the line and say, get with the program. This is what it is. But, as an organization, we are experiencing a lot of change, and I think people are recognizing that with, the rapid pace of change across not just our bank, but the industry and technology, that things have to change.
Terrific, thanks. Renee, I noticed you were excited about some of the points Shelagh was making. Anything you would add to that with regards to adoption or?
No, I mean, everything she said was exactly true, right? You need tone at the top. You need people to buy in. You need the naysayers to, kind of be drowned out by the people who want the good stuff. And I think in the end, I just wanted to ask you, how long did that process take of agreeing on the taxonomy and moving everybody forward? How long did that take? Because when people hear how long that takes, they think, man, I don't know if I'm
So I think the good news is it didn't take, I think it was 8 months to agree on the colors.
That's what it took.
It took us 4 to 5 months, probably. We brought all the, the reps from the use cases together, and there was a lot of discussion back and forth, and because everyone, more probably around the organizational structure. Within CIBC, we have 60,000 org units. We have more org units than we do employees, and we were not about to put in place 60,000 org units in eGRC, and we go to 17 levels within that taxonomy. And some people are very stuck on, our org unit sits at 11, level 11, and that's how we want it. If you can say, eGRC is not meant to be a hierarchical organization reporting structure. So through a lot of dialogue and weighing out the benefits, we actually agreed on a 5-level structure and limiting. I think we've got 4,000 org units with only about 500 that are active. So if people can see the bigger picture, and it takes time, and if you listen to them, I think listening to them, you may not always accept what they're saying, but by at least listening to them and having that dialogue and pointing out things that they may not have taken into account, and as well, they can point out things that we may not have taken into account, but at the end of the day, there's balance. And I guess the good news is that we went to the steering committee with a recommendation. We did not go to the steering committee for them to decide based on a deadlock. So we'd already come to the conclusion that this is the recommendation, and so we went that way. And we've had subsequent discussions about maybe rejigging some things. Again, if it makes sense for all the programs that we have in place, then absolutely we'll look at it. But we can't just look at the individual use case without understanding the impact across.
Gotcha.
The other thing, just sorry about sort of early adoption, and I think this was another sort of key to our initial success, was by selecting a program that's mature. Some people think that, if you have something that isn't working, then maybe automation will make it work. It doesn't happen. It does not work that way. And you need something that's well understood, well established. And that has sort of been my mantra all along. And I recently came across a quote by Bill Gates that basically says, using technology to automate an efficient process will magnify the efficiency. Using technology to automate an inefficient process will magnify the inefficiency. So, I've had a discussion with a number of people about this over the last couple of days. Yes, you can continue to mature as you are automated, but I would say don't look at that as the first step as you're building out various programs, because
And that goes back to the idea that you don't let the platform tell you how to manage risk.
Exactly.
You tell the platform how you're going to manage your risk, right? And so you have to come to the platform understanding that that's what you want to do. Like I tell people, you may be going to the market and it looks like you're buying ServiceNow. Because it kind of looks like that, right? It's SaaS, it's hosted. It looks like you're buying something super simple. It gets showed to you in a real. No, you are deploying what is close to as J.D. Edwards as you might get. These are big implementations that take a lot of thought, right? And so part of me feels like, yes, that's exactly true. You do have to know all that. And the road to ruin is littered with former clients who third time was a charm.
yeah.
Third time is a charm.
So Renee, what would be your recommendation in terms of helping mature the processes or the program before you deploy? What would you do relatively
So
quickly?
if you read any of my research, I have a GRC maturity model. I'll tell you, you can't get past a 3 if you don't get into the platform. But you shouldn't be in the platform until you're a 3. If you don't have policies, procedures, standards, you don't have good workflow, you haven't figured out what you want in your reporting, how you want that to look. If you don't know what any of that looks like, buying a platform is not going to make any of that any easier for you. It's just going to complicate it, right? And even if you wanted to give everything over to the machine, eventually you're going to want to do more with it, right? Eventually you're going to say, nope, I want it to work like this, I want to know this, and now you find yourself, priced out of your platform again, right? So that's the stuff I think is really important. And just decide and do it. If
Yes.
it turns out later the data model wasn't quite right, so what? We'll abstract around that with reporting. Just do it. Decide and do it. Collecting data now, is more important than not doing anything, right? I mean, that was to me, like, I have to push people in that direction. Doing something is better than doing nothing. Let me ask you one more thing, though, because what I hear, I work primarily with chief information security officers, right? And they like nothing touchy or feely. I drive them crazy because I love to hug. They love nothing touchy-feely, right? So everything has to be quantitative. How do you answer that at the eGRC level, that you're not just guessing?
So that's a really good question. And so we try to focus on that, there are many qualitative aspects of things that impact and feed into decision-making and analytics, and it's not just about the quants. And the use cases that we have deployed right now are more qualitative in nature. We've got issues management, controls, the libraries, surveys, compliance, control testing, and we've just deployed the metrics for key risk indicators. And it's really understanding that it is not just quants, it's qualitative. And the other, one thing to keep in that also is that any technology, you have to manage expectations in terms of the capabilities of the technology, that at the end of the day, you still have to do your job. Right. Automation does not take away from judgment, decisions, discussions, debates. It's really the means to provide the information to have those and help with decision making. I had a number, when we did our first implementation, some of the questions we got in terms of the capability were quite astounding, to the point where I was honestly saying it is not going to get the coffee for you, and it's not replacing the dialogues, picking up the phone, or emails.
Right.
You still have to do your job.
Yeah.
And just reflecting on that point, Shelagh, I think getting the qualitative aspects into the application is, or into the tool is key, though. Because what happens is that quantitative aspect is a goal. And then if you don't have the qualitative aspects factored in, we won't chase that goal of making it quantitative too. In other words, what happens is, like, if something is out of mind and it's out of sight, and then we won't be able to make it quantitative too. So we're increasingly seeing that getting those qualitative measures into the application, over time what they do is start retiring those and then make it into the quantitative aspects. Yeah.
And I just want to tell you guys, qualitative analysis, when it's done right, when it's done tabletop, and you're doing that and you mean to do it well, it is just as effective. You guys can go now. I think you have to actually download it. The government won't give it to you for free anymore. But right before Hurricane Katrina, FEMA did a study called Hurricane Pam. Yeah, it was the exact same thing, except it was a slow-moving hurricane that topped the levees, but they didn't break, right? But what's astounding is when you see the outcome, the number of dead, the number of injured, the number of displaced, how long they were displaced, what happened, what was underground, what ended up above ground, all of it turned out to be true. There was not one piece of data there. It was a room like this, full of tables like this, filled with first responders from all the parishes. So that quantitative analysis didn't matter in that qualitative sense because they were so good at getting that qualitative analysis, right? So for me, if you guys aren't sitting around doing tabletop exercises about this stuff, you really should be. And if you need help on what that means and how to do it, I have a YouTube channel that can help you with that. Right.
Well, I mean, to your earlier point about looking at the story that comes out of it.
Right.
And that's what I think we sometimes miss, because we sometimes get too far down into the weeds and we miss what it actually is.
I tell CISOs all the time, quit bringing threat and vulnerability data, bring me a story, right? I can't make a decision based on how many threats we have. We had the same last week. What difference does that make, right? Tell me a story. What does it really mean? What should I be really worried about?
Gotcha. So where would you say you're at today? What are the results that you're seeing from the deployment?
So overall, I'd say
program?
we've been very successful. So our first implementation was probably the biggest one that we've done to date. And we had some sort of objectives going into that, and that was stick to out of the box as much as possible. And I can't emphasize that enough. We didn't want any degradation of user experience. Obviously, stay on time, on budget, continue to meet regulatory requirements, and get user adoption. And it has all gone very well. We have over, I think it's about 1,100 users. 500 to 600 are very active users. Some are more for just gathering information. And when I say active, they are in entering issues, doing control testing. And one thing, so we did our first big implementation just almost 2 years ago. And based on the roadmap and our prioritization criteria, we looked at 2 use cases last year. And, sorry, 3. We implemented one, which was around regulatory change management and associated risk assessment. The other 2, as we started peeling away, this is where the program maturity comes in. It was clear from a program perspective, they were not ready to onboard onto a technology platform. There were too many unknowns, too many things that had yet to be decided. So that was a really important learning for me in terms of paying attention to the early warning signs. So that helped to sort of rejig how we approach things going forward in terms of really test the maturity, getting the users engaged. And when I have people come to me and say, have you thought about this use case, or I've got this use case, how do I get on the roadmap, versus, oh, we're doing that next, or when is it going to end? There's a lot of attention around this program across the bank, because I think people really do see that there is benefit to it, and particularly as we realize more and more that the risks that we're looking at really are not mutually exclusive. There's a lot of things that cross, and by having integration, that goes a long way to better storytelling. The other thing is and this came up again this morning, is be mindful about the pace that you do it. Things, yes, we know that we have to keep up with the changing environment and what have you, But I would say, look at each use case and do each use case at a time. We thought we could do multiple. As an organization, we're not prepared for that from a change perspective. So it's being mindful about the sequencing and the people that you're engaging.
Yeah, and something that I personally noticed at CIBC and few other clients who have been successful at doing an out-of-the-box implementation or no customization at all. I think there is a misnomer that can exist that when we do an out-of-the-box application, it'll be fast. It can be done very quickly. I think we still cannot take any shortcuts. I think that's the key to keep in mind. You have to do the requirements and make sure that you are paying attention to the requirements, because at the end of the day, the story will come back that, oh, this is yet another implementation that we're doing if we go down the path of just implementing the tool. I think listening to what our users are saying, that is key, because they are telling us what they want from the tool or what they want from the future of the system. And then we take a step back and then we look at what are those requirements conveying to us, actually, and then we put together the use cases, take a methodical approach, and then get ready to demonstrate the tool to them. I think that was something that we did at CIBC too, is that the conference room pilot sessions, etc., were very well received.
Very helpful. So conference room pilots, for those that aren't aware, are basically the show and tell of your company's version of MetricStream or eGRC. So whatever configurations you're doing, basically they come on site and do a demo, and we had a lot of our users come in, and it goes a long way in supporting the change management, identifying, well, you see, this really isn't that different from how we do it today, or yes, we realize it's different, however, this is how we're thinking we can get around it. Or manage it, or rejig the process a bit. So that is, really key, and we, spend a lot of time planning and executing on those, but it was very, very helpful. One other thing that we've done is with our metrics, the key risk indicators. That was one program where we were looking to deploy, full out, and we quickly recognized that it wasn't quite where we needed. But so what we did is we literally did straight out of the box, and we've limited it to the key risk indicators that feed into our risk appetite statement. So it's a really small group that are got their hands on in the system, and we're basically taking it as a pilot right now for them to say, okay, this is out of the box. Are there any things that that are must-haves? And we'll address them. And what we didn't want to do is react right away and say yes. I like to say we need to experience it, and then we can assess it. We shouldn't assess it before we actually experience it.
Yep. And along the same lines, Shelagh, also, I think it'll be helpful for the audience to know that when you all knew the capabilities of the platform and the applications very well, and I think there was right expectations set with the business groups too, that it cannot serve you coffee. To your point. Like, and it'll not do certain things, and then you have to be mindful and pretty clear about that. And I think that sort of helped you all. We all have been talking in the last several days, or like in the last few days, about moving to the first line of defense. And I think this is going to be a challenge statement that will be in front of us. I think we will try to do a lot of these using the platform and the tool itself. As we make a left shift to the first line of defense, we will start solving that problem with control testing. We'll start solving that problem with evidence gathering and things like that. But the fact is that the first line of defense probably is not even used to such kind of things. I think we have that journey that we need to cover of the GRC process transformation, whereby it needs to be made very simple for them and easy for them, and then make it part of their DNA as to what they're going to do. And then second line of defense and third line of defense will continue to do the control testing and audits and things like that.
Yeah. I mean, our first line is quite engaged. It's taken a while to get there. And we have what we refer to as 1A, 1B, which drives me nuts. But anyway, the 1B is really they're in the business and they support the business leaders, but there's still work to be done there, absolutely.
Gotcha. Renee, anything you would add to that? Clearly, the out of the box, the taxonomy, the change management as some of the key elements? Anything else
No, I was just going to say that there's, we won't engage with you on a GRC-related anything unless you're willing to talk to us about organizational change management, because you're not going to be, if you don't take that seriously, you're not going to be successful. So that's one of the things, I won't work with you if you're not willing to have that conversation. It's so important to adoption and the corporate adoption of what you're about to do, right? That's a big deal for me. Yeah, I really think that's all I wanted to say about that.
And I think the key there is also keep in mind that change management is not just training. Training is the technical, this is how you execute in the system. Change management goes beyond that, and it's really the why we're doing this and where we're going to with it. And it's, in many cases, behavioral changes as well. And that's really where it's important to have the support from the senior executives to message that and also act on it as well.
Right. I tell people, illustrate all the problems.
Yeah.
Illustrate everything that you think is a problem today that you want to get rid of. It takes too long to get this report done. I can only tell you what the risk is once a year. How is any of this any good? I don't mind actually throwing myself on the, I've done it more than once. As an engineer, I've thrown myself on the audit bonfire more than once. That's how you get that stuff done, right? And so, I think that's, the other thing I think is really important when it comes to the end users and getting them indoctrinated into it and saying, this is the way we work now. The way I tell people, if you're having a hard time with adoption, tie it to budget. Ta-da!
Yeah.
Done, right? Like, you can't get your budget until you justify it with risk. Like, oh, hang on a minute, now everybody's going to do it because everybody wants money. And you're not going to get your money unless you justify to me that you need this based on risk. That gets everybody in the game, and it gets everybody fighting for the same thing, and we're all after that. And then we were doing it anyway. We were just doing it a different way.
Differently,
right? So as soon as you put that in there, and then I'll just say, from an adoption perspective, I've come up, 1,000 different ways. I have some clients who are really punitive, and so they want the response to be, you do it or you're fired. That's a big 4 thing. Do it or you're fired. And then there's other places that say, no, we're kind and fun, and it's fast, friendly. That's who we are. We want to do risk management like that, right? And you're just like, oh, for the love of. So no, but we do. We would go buy. I swear to you, I bought a bowling trophy. If you want people to get into risk management, tell them, bring me the best risk this quarter, and this 4-foot bowling trophy with someone else's name on it is yours. For the quarter until someone beats you next quarter, right? And now someone in the cube has this giant, ridiculous thing that pokes through the ceiling now, and they're so happy to have it. It doesn't even have their name on it. And all they had to do was tell me something really, really bad. And I was so happy to hear it. I gave them a trophy. That's how risk management has to be, right? That's how we're going to do it. I'm so happy to, and I tell people, I get out of bed every day excited to talk about risk. It's stupid and crazy, but I get out of bed every day. I can't wait to talk about this. I want people to be that excited to be part of risk management. And if I can make that happen everywhere, I will come do it. Rent me for 25 minutes, and I will come to your place of business and get you super excited about risk management. I think it's a lot of fun. I think it's a great way to talk about opportunity. I think it's a great way to think through corporate things that we need to think about. And I think it's a great, great way to find real opportunity in what you thought you wanted to do, right? And I think that's what risk is about. Risk for me is not fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Risk is all about opportunity. We do risk management so we can take more risk, not less. Don't forget that.
Terrific. So what's next in the exciting journey ahead?
So we have an aggressive plan for next year, and taking into account, as I mentioned, there's a lot of emerging and evolving risks, continued to be regulatory pressure. We 2 years ago, acquired a bank out of Chicago, and with our presence and size there now, there's increased regulatory requirements. Yeah. So keeping that in mind, and the whole notion about conversions and integration, we are continuing on our journey with our roadmap and deployments. We'll continue to reprioritize our roadmap as needed. And we'll continue to, consider other use cases as the needs evolve. And, we look at, as I mentioned, eGRC, it's not, it's a technology, but it is an enabler that allows us to move ahead.
Did you want to share the roadmap?
Sure. I'm not sure if we can put the roadmap up behind us.
actually pretty exciting. So I would love for folks to see that, if you can.
I can't tell you guys.
Well, I
it
can-
is quite
yeah.
extraordinary
Yeah.
from over here. Many colors. It's got
We can
nice
try and
little-
describe
oh,
it
here
to
it is.
you.
Yeah.
So you'll see we've split it out between what we've already completed, what's in the short term, medium term. So the short term is what we have planned for the next year, which is quite aggressive. You know, and it's the first time we're actually branching outside of our risk group and going into business continuity and third-party risk. I just explained, they were further down the roadmap initially, but CIBC is in the process of building 2 new office towers in downtown Toronto, and right now we operate out of 22 locations, so we're going to be consolidating into 2, which poses concentration risk from a continuity perspective. So there's a requirement and regulatory requirement that we have an automated continuity program in place. And more third-party risk is joined with business continuity. So those are 2 big use cases for next year. And as I said, we'll continue to review the roadmap and assess and learn and make sure that we, take our learnings and change what we need to and not change what we don't need to.
Terrific. We'll open it up. If people have questions, give people a chance to ask those questions of the panel here. So if we can have someone bring a mic over. Hard to see, but I think there's a question here.
Yeah.
Right here.
Oh,
It's
here it
on
comes.
its
Somebody's
way.
coming here.
I think I'm pronouncing it right. Sheila?
Terrific.
Sheila?
Yeah, Sheila.
Sheila.
Yeah, Sheila. I have a question. I know you mentioned about the implementation phase and the pre-planning and everything before you did that. Within that, you were writing the policies and going through, as you said, all the states. How long did that implementation phase take before you actually started implementing into the software itself?
So I will say, for the first use case, one of the advantages that we had is we were actually moving from another technology platform. So a lot of the supporting effort had already been done in terms of the policies were in place and the methodology was well understood. So we fortunately we knew what our requirements were, but the initial assessment in terms of assessing the prioritization of the use cases, doing the vendor selection, probably took us about 9 months. And then when we actually, started, the real implementation, that was another 9 months before we actually handed in the system. And because of the nature of ongoing deployments, not only did we put sort of support in place from an end user perspective, it also helped that we are in constant contact with MetricStream because it wasn't a one and done. So we continued to be, engaged all the time. So in some ways, it feels like it's never done. But the first one was about 9 months from the time we actually started the development work.
Yeah. I think I saw some other hands back there. Back. Any other questions?
No? Easy crowd.
Yeah. All right. In that case, any closing comments, remarks from
No,
your
I think it's
perspective?
just, it's not easy. There is a lot of effort. There is some compromise involved. I think another key thing is that it needs to be business-led and not technology-led. And, stick to out of the box and get the taxonomies in place and make sure you have really, really strong change management and executive support.
Fantastic.
And have some fun. as well.
There you go.
Yes.
That's fun. Risk management is fun.
It's very fun.
They don't
All right.
believe it at Forrester. I have the best coverage area in the whole company. They still don't get it.
All right. Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Give a hand